This topic is about outsourcing and vertical integration. They are, to a degree, opposite types of concepts. So if we think back to our supply chain, and we think an example of the beer company, often what tends to happen is people outsource things that they're not as good at. And one of the most obvious immediate things to do is to outsource your logistics. So you're not outsourcing something that you do within the business, you're kind of outsourcing the links between the bits in the supply chain. And that's quite common. That's why you see lots and lots of logistics firms, lorries, Eddie Stobart, all those kind of things are people that are outsourcing their logistics because it's quite a specialised type of activity. But you could also think about, the converse of that is to think about what should I do in the supply network? Should I do it all? Should I do less? Should I do more? So you can decide to integrate downstream, so you can start to buy or set up your own wholesaler and retailer. So for example, we did some consultancy for a cake firm in Leeds. They currently sell to a wholesaler who sells to a retailer, like for example the university cafes. So they could decide to set up their own coffee shops, which obviously requires a lot of investment, and you've got to look at whether you are able to do that, whether you can run them well enough compared to somebody else. One of the benefits of getting into a supply network and not doing this is that network exists for you. For example, you sell into a wholesaler. If you look at episodes of The Apprentice, they can then utilise the whole of the network in terms of the customer acquisition cost for finding the customers to buy your stuff is being carried by somebody else. They've got all their overheads in running all those shops. That is why they're taking the margin from you. So if you think you can do it better, then it's worth doing. If you don't, then you can't. If you look upstream, people often decide that they're going to make some of those raw components themselves. For example, a mobile phone company might decide that it's going to want to make the chips that run the mobile phones, and they might want to outsource some of the design of those products, but decide to make them themselves in order to maybe protect their patents and stop other people having access to that technology. So the question is, how do we decide? And there's a nice little theoretical model from the textbook that helps us think about outsourcing. So if you ask yourself these set of questions, it enables you to say, for a particular business, what should we do? So if the activity is strategically important, then we should keep it in-house. So for example, brewing of beer is probably strategic importance to a brewery. We wouldn't want to outsource that particular activity. Do we know what we're doing? Okay, if the answer is yes, then we should keep exploring it. If we don't know what we're doing, for example, logistics, then we would think about outsourcing that. Are we better at it than other people? If we still are, then we should think about keeping it in-house. In-house is the phrase that we use to describe companies not outsourcing, keeping it under their business umbrella. And if we like to improve, and the answer to all those questions is no, then we can think about outsourcing. And there's been quite a lot of discussion in recent years about outsourcing, in particular what's called offshoring, which is taking a business that you used to do, part of your business, an operation, and putting it somewhere else in another country. One big example is the banks, where they decided to remove quite a lot of their customer service functions and put them in places like India. And what they found was that was overall a mistake, because they didn't look at those questions properly. So the activity is of strategic importance. Customer service is strategically important. So they got that question wrong. They did have specialised knowledge, yes. So they got that question wrong. What they're finding is that their performance was better than the people that were able to do it in India. So again, they got that question wrong. And quite a few people persevered with trying to improve the performance of those outsourcing companies in India. And Not always, but quite often they fail. So they have then brought that activity back in-house because the answer to those questions turned out to be yes, and they have now brought them back from India back into the UK, and they're making that fact a strategic performance issue for their customers. So they're capitalising on that change. So that's a good example about outsourcing and offshoring.